Sir, that seat is not for you. Step back or I will have you escorted off this aircraft. The words landed like a hand on a shoulder, firm, practiced, used to being obeyed. And then from behind a voice even colder, smoother. The kind of voice that had never once in its life been told no and believed it. I don't have time for this. Just move him. Stop. Freeze everything right here. The champagne flute halfway to a man's lips across the aisle. The overhead bin half closed. The soft hum of recycled air cycling through a cabin that suddenly forgot how to breathe. Freeze it all because what you are looking at right now in Seat 1. A of Meridian Airways, Flight 4417, bound from JFK to Los Angeles at 7:42 in the morning is a moment that is about to change the lives of every single person on board this aircraft. The man in that seat has not moved. He is sitting with his spine straight against cream leather that smells faintly of citrus cleaner and something older. Something that costs money without announcing it. His hoodie is dark navy, soft with years of use. The cuffs frayed just enough to tell the truth about how often it has been worn not from poverty, but from preference from a man who keeps what works and discards what performs. His hands rest open on his thighs, palms facing up. No fists, no tension he wants anyone to see. His eyes are open now, dark and calm and tired in a way that comes from weeks without real sleep, not from fear. Around him, the first-class cabin of Meridian Airways Flight 4417 is everything it is designed to be. 8 seats in a 2x2 configuration, each one wrapped in pale cream leather with walnut trim that catches the soft overhead lighting. Small vases of white orchids sit at the forward galley station, their stems slightly off-center in the way of things arranged by someone who was in a hurry but wanted to appear otherwise. The carpet is deep charcoal. The air smells of privilege and recycled oxygen in roughly equal measure. There are 8 passengers in this cabin. 6 of them are watching. One of them is Connor Mills, 33 years old, lead flight attendant, blonde hair sculpted into place with something that costs $22 a jar. Smile precise and trained and currently not being deployed. He is standing in the aisle with his arms slightly out from his sides, not quite blocking the row but close enough that the message is clear. He is wearing the full Meridian Airways uniform. His name tag is polished. His posture says he has done this before. His eyes say he is hoping he does not have to do it again. Behind him, near the galley curtain, Tyler Gross stands with his arms folded. 28 years old. He has been a flight attendant for 3 years and a follower his entire life. He is watching Connor the way a student watches a teacher ready to imitate whatever comes next. And at the far end of the first-class aisle, standing with one hand resting on the back of row 2, as though she owns it, which in her mind she does, is the woman whose voice cut through the cabin like a letter opener through an envelope. Diana Wolfe, 44 years old, white trench coat belted tight at the waist. Oversized sunglasses still on despite the fact that the cabin lighting is artificial and the plane has not moved. A red Bordeaux leather handbag resting on her left forearm, like a badge of rank, held at an angle that says it was positioned consciously that it was meant to be seen. Her blonde hair is pulled back into something that looks effortless and took 45 minutes. Her jaw is set. Her eyes, when they finally settle on the man in seat 1, do not see a person. They see an obstacle. She does not see a man who has spent the last 3 weeks in Singapore and Seoul negotiating infrastructure contracts with 3 separate governments. She does not see the man who quietly built a company from a spare bedroom and $20,000 in borrowed money into a national operation that processes more supply chain logistics than most people will ever know exists. She does not see a man whose name is on a contract with Meridian Airways worth $340 million up for renewal in 60 days. She sees a hoodie, she sees sneakers, she sees a problem in her seat. Occupied, she had said the word small and sharp and deliberate. The way she said it carried something inside it that was not about a seat at all. In row 4, a slightly behind and to the left of the confrontation, a young man named Damon Cruz has not looked up from his phone in the past 90 seconds. He is 32 years old, Latino, wearing a gray crew neck and noise-canceling headphones that are currently not playing anything. He has 800,000 followers on his travel vlog channel and an eye trained to recognize the exact moment when ordinary life stops being ordinary. His screen is recording. His face is still. His thumb has not moved from the record button since Diana Wolf walked through that cabin door. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Drop your city in the comments right now. Tell me where you are watching from. Because what happens in the next few minutes on this aircraft is the kind of thing that reaches into your chest and grabs something you did not know was still there. If this moment already made something tighten in your stomach, if you already know exactly what is happening, and why hit subscribe. Because in the next few minutes, this man sitting in seat 1A with his palms open and his jaw relaxed and his silence steady as stone is going to show every single person on this plane exactly who they just made the mistake of crossing. Let's go back 20 minutes earlier. The rain had been working on Terminal 4 at JFK since before dawn, a low gray percussion against reinforced glass that matched the weight behind Marcus Hale's eyes. He stood alone near Gate B-22, backpack slung over his left shoulder, watching the ground crew move across the wet tarmac in yellow safety vests, their movements practiced and unhurried despite the weather. He had always liked that. People who did the work without announcing it. At 47, Marcus Hale had mastered the specific art of being invisible when it suited him. And this morning it suited him very well. 3 weeks in Asia. Singapore first, where the negotiations ran past midnight for 4 consecutive nights, and the air conditioner in the conference room was set to a temperature that suggested the other side believed discomfort was a bargaining tactic. Then Seoul, where the language barrier required a translator who was technically fluent but emotionally imprecise in ways that cost them 2 full days of trust building. Then back to Singapore to close. The deal itself, a 5-year infrastructure coordination contract linking Hale integrated systems with the digital logistics networks of 3 Pacific governments, was worth $2.3 billion. He had signed the final page at 2:17 in the morning, shaken 3 hands, and been in a car to the airport within 40 minutes. That had been 19 hours ago. Inside his backpack, a laptop sat in a padded sleeve. On that laptop, encrypted and protected by 3 separate authentication layers, sat the operational frameworks that quietly directed 14% of all maritime logistics flowing in and out of American ports. Not the kind of thing that made headlines. The kind of thing that if it stopped working on a Tuesday afternoon would make headlines by Wednesday, in ways no one would fully understand. Marcus did not think about any of this. He was thinking about his son. The hoodie was Marcus Jr.'s. His own luggage had been delayed in Seoul, a baggage handling mix-up that his assistant Yvonne was still managing from Manhattan. This hoodie had been in his carry-on because his 19-year-old son had left it in the car 3 weeks ago, and Marcus had meant to return it. Marcus Jr. was in his first year at MIT studying computer systems engineering, and like his father at that age, he owned very few things that were expensive and cared deeply for everything he had. The hoodie was dark navy soft, the cuffs worn at the edges from years of use. It smelled faintly of his son's deodorant, and something Marcus could only describe as home. He was wearing it because it was the warmest thing he had in his carry-on. He was keeping it on because he had not slept more than 4 hours in 2 days, and he was too tired to care what he looked like. The gate agent, a woman in her mid-30s with her hair pulled back and a name tag that read, Carolyn, scanned his boarding pass without looking up. Green light, quick beep. Seat 1, a Mr. Hale. Welcome back. He nodded and walked toward the jet bridge. The jet bridge was narrow and cool, a transitional corridor between the chaos of the terminal and the contained world of the aircraft. Marcus always noticed this moment, the brief suspended space between one place and another. He had been flying first class for 11 years. He had been questioned at the door, redirected toward economy, asked to verify his identity at this exact transitional point more times than he had a clean count of. Each time the person doing it had been certain. Each time they had been wrong. He wondered briefly and without bitterness whether this would be one of those times. He stepped into the cabin. Connor Mills was stationed near the bulkhead, adjusting a small vase of orchids with the focused attention of someone who needed something to do with their hands. When Marcus turned left into first class, Connor's eyes moved from the orchids to Marcus in a single practiced sweep. The sweep started at the sneakers. It moved up the gray slacks to the navy hoodie. It stopped at the backpack and stayed there 1 second longer than it should have. "Can I see your boarding pass?" "Sir?" Connor said, his voice carrying the specific warmth of hospitality training. Genuine enough to pass, not quite warm enough to land. "Economy is to the right." Marcus did not react. He had heard this sentence in various forms his entire adult life. The wording changed. The meaning never did. 1A, he said quietly, holding up his phone. Connor leaned forward slightly as though the screen might be lying and examined it. "First class. Seat 1A. Purchased at full fare. Diamond Elite Plus status." The phone did not contradict itself. "Right," Connor said after a beat, the warmth dropping a half degree. "Seats right there. Overhead bins are reserved for standard carry-on size." His eyes moved to the backpack again. "It'll fit," Marcus said. He stowed it effortlessly, settled into seat 1A, and closed his eyes. The leather was cool against the back of his head. The cabin hummed with the low, professional sound of pre-departure preparation. For 4 minutes there was nothing but that. Then somewhere near the front of the jet bridge, the sound of heels. Sharp. Fast. A staccato rhythm that did not slow as it entered the cabin, the pace of someone who did not adjust their speed for shared spaces because they had never learned that other people's spaces mattered. Marcus kept his eyes closed for 3 more seconds. He had learned early, at an age when the lessons were still sharp, that the most effective response to being underestimated was not anger and not performance. It was patience. It was letting people show you exactly who they were before you decided what to do with that information. At 23 years old, he had walked into the office of a venture capital firm in downtown Chicago, wearing a suit he had borrowed from his roommate 1 size too large in the shoulders, carrying a business plan he had written and rewritten 7 times. The woman at the reception desk had looked at him for a moment, then past him, then at the clipboard in her hand. "Are you here for the maintenance crew?" she had asked. He remembered the way the room smelled, coffee and carpet cleaner. He remembered the slight tilt of her head, genuinely confused, not malicious, which was somehow worse. He had smiled and told her his name and the name of the partner he was there to meet. She had found it on the list and looked back at him with an expression he had catalogued and filed away, the recalibration face. The micro moment when someone's assumption meets the truth and has to update itself without acknowledging the assumption ever existed. He had not gotten the funding that day. He had gone home, made a pot of coffee, and added 40 pages to the business plan. 24 years later, the firm that turned him down that morning now used Hale integrated systems to manage the logistics backbone of 4 of its largest portfolio companies. They had never acknowledged the connection. He had never needed them to. He thought of none of this consciously as he sat in seat 1A with his eyes closed. It was simply the sediment of his life settled at the bottom and forming the stillness above it. He heard the heels stop. He opened his eyes. She was standing in the entrance to first class, like someone arriving at a party that had started without permission. Diana Wolfe, 44 years old, wore the trench coat belted so precisely it looked architectural. The sunglasses were still on. The red Bordeaux bag rested on her forearm at the exact angle it had rested for every flight she had taken in the past 6 years. Which was to say twice a week on average. Which was to say Diana Wolfe had boarded approximately 600 flights in that time and never once adjusted her expectations to match reality. Reality in her experience adjusted itself to match her. She did not look at Connor immediately. She looked at seat 1A. Then she looked at the man in seat 1A. Then she looked at Connor. "My seat," she said. 2 words. Flat. The way you say it when you have already decided there is no discussion. Connor's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, the way a compass needle moves when the magnetic field around it changes. He had worked this route for 3 years. He knew Diana Wolfe's name before she boarded. He knew her Diamond Elite status, her standing coffee order, her preference for the window, her history of complaints when those preferences were not met. The standing note in her passenger profile added 2 years ago by a supervisor whose name no longer appeared in the company directory read, "Priority Accommodation. Handle proactively. Ms. Wolfe Connor said, the smile arriving slightly too late. The flight is completely full this morning. Seat 1A is currently. My seat, she said again. The repetition was not for emphasis. It was because she genuinely did not see why anything else needed to be said. Her eyes moved to Marcus, and in that movement was the entire architecture of her assumption. She did not see a passenger. She did not see someone who had purchased the same class of ticket she had at the same fare tier through the same booking portal. She looked at the navy hoodie and the worn sneakers and the backpack in the overhead bin, and she performed in the span of a single second a calculation that had nothing to do with ticketing and everything to do with a belief she had never once examined because she had never once needed to. She saw a mistake that needed to be corrected. Occupied, she said, and the word carried a small, involuntary laugh in its wake. The kind of laugh that means, "Can you believe this?" By him. The two words hit the cabin air and stayed there. Marcus had not moved. His hands were still open on his thighs. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has heard a sentence like that in so many different rooms that it no longer has the power to wound him. What it had the power to do, what it had always had the power to do, was to clarify. Every time someone said something like that, they handed him a piece of information he could use. He filed it away. He waited. Connor moved toward him, lowering his voice by half a register, the hospitality training kicking in to soften what was about to be said, without changing what was being said. Sir, we do have seat 1B available. Same service, same view, just I don't sit in aisle seats, Diana said from behind Connor, not loudly but clearly addressing the room rather than any individual. I have flown this route every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years. Seat 1. A has a window. I need to sleep. I specifically selected this seat when I booked. She paused, then added, I need you to handle this. The last sentence was for Connor. The whole speech had been for the cabin. In seat 2. A man named Preston Holt. 55 years old, private equity suit that cost more than most monthly rents shifted his briefcase from his lap to the shared side table between seat 2A and the aisle in a movement that was not quite accidental. He did not speak. He did not need to. The briefcase expanded his territory by 8 inches and communicated to anyone paying attention that he had decided which side of this moment he was on. Marcus looked at Connor. I'm in the seat listed on my ticket, he said. His voice was level, not aggressive, not pleading. The tone of a man simply reporting a fact the way you report that the temperature outside is 40 degrees. If there's an issue, the gate agent can resolve it. Diana stepped forward 1 pace, bringing herself alongside Connor close enough that her perfume reached Marcus before her words did. Expensive heavy, the kind of scent that announces itself in rooms. She leaned slightly forward and spoke in the lowered voice of someone who believes they are being generous. Listen, I don't know if this was an upgrade error or miles you put together over time. I don't know your situation, but I pay full fare. I am a Diamond Elite member. I know James Okafor personally. We've had dinner. She paused, letting the name land. So do yourself a favor. Pick up your bag, walk to the back, and let's all move on before this becomes something embarrassing for everyone. A breath moved through the cabin. The man across the aisle held his champagne flute very still. Marcus turned his head slightly and met her eyes. The only thing embarrassing here, he said quietly, is the assumption. Diana recoiled 1 millimeter. Not from fear, from surprise. In 44 years of life, very few people had spoken back to her in that tone, and the ones who had were people she considered her equals, which was a category she had not yet placed this man in. Her jaw tightened. Connor, she said, dropping even the pretense of addressing Marcus directly. Handle this. Connor straightened. The calculation in his eyes ran its course in under 2 seconds. On one side, a man in a hoodie with a valid ticket. On the other, a Diamond Elite passenger whose profile said, handle proactively, who had just invoked the name of the company's COO, whose displeasure had consequences he could trace and measure. The math to him was simple. Sir Connor said, his voice losing the warmth entirely now, something harder underneath it. There appears to have been a system conflict with the reservation. Given Ms. Wolf's standing with our carrier, I'm going to need you to relocate. We can offer you seat 1B, or, if you'd prefer, we have an Economy Plus seat available with additional legroom. I paid for this seat, Marcus said. Still calm, still still. I will not be moving. Diana made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite contempt. Somewhere between the two, which is where her most cutting expressions lived. $7,000, she said, repeating the number back as though it were a punchline. Please. You don't look like someone who even owns a credit card. Something moved through the cabin at that. Not sound, exactly. More like a shift in atmospheric pressure, the way air changes before weather arrives. In row 4, a Damon Cruz's thumb adjusted the angle of his phone without the rest of his body moving at all. Near the galley curtain, Sophia Reyes, 29 years old, junior flight attendant, Meridian employee for 4 years, stood very still with a beverage tray in both hands. She had heard everything. Her eyes moved between Diana and Marcus, and then to Connor, and the expression on her face was the expression of someone watching a fire start and knowing exactly where the accelerant was stored. Connor's voice shifted again, harder now, the hospitality training fully abandoned. Sir, you are becoming disruptive. Marcus reached for his phone in his jacket pocket. A single deliberate movement. Connor took one step forward. Do not. I'm not doing anything, Marcus said, and the quietness of his voice in that moment was the quietest thing in the cabin. I am not raising my voice. I am not threatening anyone. I am sitting in the seat I paid for. He looked up from the phone and held Connor's gaze with something that was not anger and not defiance. Something older and more settled than either of those. You need to decide very carefully what you do next. Diana spoke before Connor could. I feel unsafe. He's threatening me. The word threatened fell into the room and occupied it completely. Connor squared his shoulders. Whatever uncertainty had been flickering in him went out. Sir, final warning. Stand up now or I will have the captain remove you as a security risk. Marcus studied Connor's face for a long moment. Saw the fear there. The weakness disguised as authority. The man who had convinced himself that following a script made him right. Then get the captain, Marcus said. Connor pointed down the aisle. Row 32, middle seat. Marcus stood. Not because he agreed, not because he had lost. He stood because he had already understood in the way he understood most things that the confrontation worth having was not this one. He reached up and unlatched his backpack from the overhead bin. He held it in one hand. Diana Wolf slid into seat 1A before the leather had finished warming. She pulled the red Bordeaux bag onto her lap and reached into it for a sanitizer wipe. She pressed it to the armrest and cleaned it slowly with exaggerated thoroughness, the gesture performing something for the cabin that she never would have said aloud. Connor watched her settle. Then he looked down the aisle at Marcus's back. Row 32, he said again to no one in particular. From row 4. A Damon Cruz watched Marcus begin the long walk toward the back of the plane. He typed 3 words into his caption field. This is wrong. Is. He did not post it yet. He was waiting. The aisle narrowed as Marcus moved. That was the physical truth of it, the ceiling descending by architectural increments, the air growing warmer and denser, the sounds multiplying a baby, somewhere in rows 20. Something a phone ringing unanswered. 2 men in matching company polo shirts discussing a meeting in voices that suggested the meeting had already gone badly before it started. The row numbers climbed. 12, 15, 21. At each number, Marcus felt eyes tracking him. The curious ones, the politely averted ones, the ones that lingered too long and then looked guiltily away. He had walked aisles like this before. He had walked aisles like this his whole adult life. There was a particular grammar to it, the way silence rearranged itself around a black man being escorted toward the back of a plane, the way people decided in under a second whether they were the kind of person who would say something and discovered in almost every case that they were not. Row 32. Connor stopped beside the middle seat and pointed with the flat of his hand, the gesture of a man indicating a space that exists to contain rather than to welcome. Marcus looked at the seat, looked at Connor, nodded once. He turned sideways, murmured "excuse me," and folded himself into the space. his knees pressed against the plastic shell of the seat ahead. Both armrests were already occupied by the passengers on either side, an arrangement that had calcified before he arrived and would not be renegotiated simply because he was there. The air vent above rattled and pushed a thin stream of lukewarm air toward the back of his neck. Connor stood in the aisle for 3 seconds after Marcus was seated, as though waiting for a protest that would justify everything that had just happened. Nothing came. Connor turned and walked back toward the front. The woman in the window seat, late 40s, reading glasses on a lanyard, pulled her carry-on bag an inch closer to herself without looking up from her book. The man in the aisle seat shifted his elbow from the shared rest to his own knee. Neither of them spoke, and then a voice low and steady from the window seat. "You were up front, weren't you?" Marcus looked sideways. The woman had closed her book. She was looking at him now, not with pity, which he would have found harder to absorb, but with the directness of someone who had decided to say the thing rather than not say it. Her name was Patrice, 60 years old. A retired teacher from Atlanta who had spent 31 years in a public school classroom where she had seen in aggregate every variety of injustice that fits inside a building and had developed the specific kind of patience that does not mean passive. She was wearing a navy blue zip-up jacket and reading Ann Tyler. She had been watching from the moment Diana Wolf's heels hit the jet bridge. "Yes," Marcus said. Patrice looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "That wasn't right." Marcus nodded once. "It happens," he said. "Patrice." "It shouldn't." 2 words, clean and precise as a ruled line. Up at the front of the plane, Connor had returned to first class and assumed the posture of someone who had resolved a situation. Tyler Gross materialized at his shoulder, and they exchanged 3 quiet words. Tyler nodded. Preston Holt from seat 2. A glanced up at Connor and gave the smallest of approving nods, the kind that costs nothing and communicates everything. Diana Wolf had produced a tablet from the red Bordeaux bag and was scrolling with the brisk efficiency of someone whose time was important enough to waste visibly. She glanced at Connor once. "Thank you," she said. "Standards, that's all it ever is." Connor smiled. In row 4. A, which was now technically Damon Cruise's position in business class, he had not moved. He was still recording. He had been recording for 11 minutes. His phone was propped at the slight angle that makes it look idle to anyone glancing past while keeping the lens in clean sight lines. He had traveled enough to know that the best footage came not from the confrontation but from what happened in the silence after it. He uploaded a 60-second clip to X. No hashtag, no tagging, just 3 sentences as the caption. "Watched a man get removed from his paid first-class seat so a white woman could take it. Staff backed her up. Plane hasn't moved. Watching." He put the phone face down on his tray table. He would check it in 4 minutes. Near the galley curtain at the rear of first class, Sophia Reyes set down the beverage tray she had been holding since before the confrontation began, placed it on the galley counter with care, and reached into the pocket of her uniform. She pulled out her personal phone. Not her work phone, her personal one. She typed 2 words into the search bar, Marcus Hale. The results loaded in under 2 seconds. Sophia stared at the screen. Then she looked up. Then she looked at the screen again. Her lips parted slightly but did not form a word. She read 1 more paragraph, put the phone away, picked up the beverage tray again, stood very still behind the galley curtain. She knew. Back in row 32, Marcus had taken his phone from his jacket pocket and unlocked it with a thumbprint that had, in the last 72 hours alone, authorized 3 separate international contracts worth a combined total that exceeded the annual revenue of Meridian Airways by a comfortable margin. He scrolled past contacts he did not need right now. He stopped at 1. Yvonne, his executive assistant. 38 years old, 10 years in his office, the person who had on 4 separate occasions prevented situations that could have become problems from becoming problems by moving faster than the situations did. He typed Flight 4417, row 32. You'll know why. The reply came in 11 seconds, already on it, standing by. Marcus set the phone face down on his thigh. He looked at the back of the seat in front of him. The upholstery was slightly worn at the headrest, the foam showing through in one corner. He rested his hands on his legs, palms down this time, and let his eyes settle on the middle distance. He was not angry. Anger had a cost he had learned over decades, and at some price was not worth paying in moments like these. What he felt was something slower and colder and more purposeful than anger. He felt the particular clarity that comes when something you have expected finally arrives, and you understand that you were right to expect it, and right to prepare for what comes after. He thought about his son, Marcus Jr., 19 first year at MIT, who texted his father every night before 11 because that had been the rule since he was 12 and neither of them had broken it yet. Who had his father's stillness and his mother's laugh. Who had never in his 19 years of life seen his father raise his voice at anything that did not deserve it. Marcus was going to have to tell him about this flight. He wanted to be able to tell him how it ended. 2 rows ahead of Marcus, Nathan Webb. 41 years old structural engineer had been sitting with his laptop open and his work document untouched for the last 8 minutes. He had watched everything from row 6 aisle seat. He had the particular expression of a man who had witnessed an accident and was now running the sequence backward in his mind, looking for the point where a different choice would have changed the outcome. His jaw was set. His laptop was still open. He had not typed a single word since Marcus walked past him. He closed the laptop. He looked forward. He looked at his hands. He looked forward again. He was not yet ready to move, but he was no longer comfortable being still. Damon Cruz checked his phone. The clip had 43,000 views. He sat up slightly in his seat and typed a second post. Plane still at the gate. Man in row 32 hasn't said a word, but something is definitely about to happen. He posted it, put the phone back on the tray table, and looked at the forward galley. He was right. The boarding door was still open. Somewhere forward, a chime sounded that was not meant for passengers. The internal language of the aircraft, the coded shorthand of departure procedure beginning to unspool. Marcus sat in row 32 and let the sounds of the economy cabin settle around him, the compressed nearness of bodies in proximity. The small negotiations of space elbows and shoulders and knees reaching their unspoken treaties. A child 2 rows back asking the same question 3 times without getting a different answer. The particular low-register anxiety of people who were about to be 35,000 feet in the air and had not fully made their peace with that. He had sat in economy hundreds of times before the company reached the altitude where he no longer had to. He had sat in middle seats and window seats, and the seats directly in front of the lavatories, where the smell reminded you constantly that you were in a sealed vessel with 200 other human beings. He had never once believed that his value was determined by which seat he occupied. What he had believed from the age when belief forms and settles in the bones was that dignity was not a question of location. It was a question of how you moved through a room, and he had spent his entire adult life moving through rooms in a way that required nothing from anyone around him. No acknowledgement, no confirmation, no permission. He had not asked for those things. He had simply built a life that made them irrelevant. The plane, however, had not gotten that particular message. Patrice beside him had gone back to her book, but was not reading it. He could tell by the way her eyes had not moved in 90 seconds. She was listening to the cabin the same way he was registering it. He looked at the seat-back pocket in front of him, at the safety card tucked inside, at the fold lines worn into it from being opened and folded and returned too many times by too many hands. He traced the sequence of the morning, the gate agent at B-22, the jet bridge Connor's eyes on the hoodie, the measured assessment, the choice that followed. The architecture of the assumption laid out in steps, each one ordinary by itself. Each one adding to something that assembled was neither ordinary nor acceptable. And then without planning it, without willing it, his mind moved backward. 21 years earlier. A Thursday morning. A shuttle flight from Chicago to Dallas. His first ever on a company ticket paid for by a man named Gerald Turner, who had taken a chance on him at a logistics startup that no one had heard of yet. Marcus was 26. He had the window seat in row 4. He had pressed his face against the glass on takeoff and felt something he had never felt before. A specific species of freedom, the kind that comes when the ground you have been working on falls away, and the distance gives you perspective. 40 minutes into the flight, the drink cart came. He asked for orange juice. The attendant handed it to him and then, without pausing, pulled the cart back before offering the rest of the row. An accident, probably. A moment of inattention. He had held his orange juice and looked out the window and decided consciously that it was not worth the cost of his composure. That was not this morning. This morning was not an accident. Nothing about this morning was inattention. Every choice made in first class had been deliberate. The look, the relocation, the sanitizer wipe on the armrest, the words chosen, and the ones left in the air to imply themselves. Every piece of it was constructed from a belief so embedded in the people enacting it that they did not recognize it as a belief at all. They recognized it as common sense, as procedure, as the natural order of a premium cabin. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, not to rest, to think. He was going to need Yvonne to contact James Okafor directly, not through the usual channels, not through the corporate scheduling assistant or the executive secretary whose job was to filter exactly this kind of contact. Directly. His personal cell. The number Marcus had for Okafor, because they had spent 4 hours on a tarmac together in Denver 2 winters ago during a ground stoppage, and by the end of it, they had exchanged numbers the way men do when they have established in the compressed time of a shared inconvenience that they are the same kind of person. Okafor was not on this flight. He was if Marcus had his schedule right in the Meridian executive offices at JFK, which was a 12-minute walk from gate B-22. He pulled out his phone again and typed to Yvonne call Okafor direct. Not his office, his cell. Tell him which seat I'm in. He'll understand. Yvonne on it. ETA from his building to your gate is 8 minutes at walk. 10 if he takes the elevator. Marcus, tell him to take the stairs. 3 rows ahead, Nathan Webb had finally opened his laptop again, but he was not looking at the screen. He was looking at the aisle, at the curtain separating business class from economy, at the invisible line that had 20 minutes ago been deployed to solve a problem that was not actually a problem. He made a decision, stood from his seat, walked toward the economy aisle. He stopped at row 32, looked at Marcus. I'm in row 6, he said. I saw what happened up front. He paused. That was wrong. Marcus looked at him. The kind of look that does not reward performance but also does not refuse sincerity. Yes, Marcus said. It was. Nathan stood there for a second more as if expecting something more to be asked of him. Nothing was. He nodded once and walked back to row 6. Patrice watched him go. Then she looked at Marcus. He needed to say it, she said. I know, Marcus said. Did it help? He thought about it honestly. It started to, he said. Up in first class, Diana Wolf had produced a pair of wireless earbuds from the red bag and was fitting them into her ears with the focused attention of someone who had decided the current situation was resolved, and all that remained was the inconvenience of a delayed departure. She had reclined the seat 2 inches not to its full position, just enough to establish that she was settling in, that this was now her space. Connor brought her a glass of champagne she had not requested, which was how he communicated that he understood what the morning had required and that he was grateful for her patience. Thank you, she said, not looking up from her tablet. Of course, Ms. Wolf. We should be pushing back within the next few minutes. She scrolled. Standards, she said almost to herself. It really isn't that complicated. Connor stood at the galley entrance, posture restored. Tyler Gross behind him was resetting the drink cart. Preston Holt had returned to his newspaper. The cabin had reassumed its pre-departure equilibrium, the kind of quiet that follows the resolution of something that most of the people in the room had decided was not their problem. But the cabin was not actually in equilibrium. It was in the specific false stillness that precedes a shift. The kind that, if you knew how to read it, was louder than noise. The man in seat 3B had not touched his pre-departure drink. He was looking at the window. The woman in seat 3A had folded her hands in her lap and was looking at them. No one in first class was making eye contact with Diana. Not from hostility, at least not yet. From the discomfort of people who had watched something happen and chosen to let it, and were now living in the gap between what they had permitted and what they believed about themselves. Near the galley curtain, Sophia Reyes was not resetting anything. She was standing with both hands pressed flat against the galley counter, looking at the back of Connor's head and doing something she had not done in 4 years of working this airline, deciding which choice she was going to live with. 4 years of watching. 4 years of knowing exactly what the unwritten rules were, the ones that lived in the margins of training documents and the silences of pre-flight briefings, the ones that meant when a passenger from a certain demographic walked into first class alone, dressed in a way that read as informal, you applied an extra layer of scrutiny that you did not apply to others, and you called it attentiveness. You called it service. You called it protecting the premium experience. She had followed those rules because she had needed the job, because the health insurance was non-negotiable, because her mother's arthritis medication cost $400 a month, and the math was simple. She had followed them because it was easier than the alternative. She took out her personal phone, opened the search results she had found 20 minutes ago, read it again. A profile piece from a business publication 18 months old with a headshot that confirmed what she had already suspected. Marcus Hale, founder and CEO of Hale Integrated Systems. Net worth estimated at $4.2 billion. One of the architects of the National Port Logistics Modernization Project. Currently in negotiations with 3 Pacific governments. She read the last line of the profile again. Hale is known for conducting unannounced site visits and operational audits of partner companies, preferring to observe how systems function when they believe they are not being watched. Sophia put the phone away. She looked at Connor, who was accepting quiet congratulations from Tyler, who had never once in 3 years formed an independent opinion about a passenger. She looked at the galley counter, at the beverage tray, at the routines of the job that had kept her quiet for 4 years. She picked up a notepad and a pen from the counter, small ones, the kind used for meal orders. She wrote something on it, quickly folded it once, and put it in her apron pocket. Then she walked through the economy curtain. Connor did not notice her leave. Diana's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. An unknown number. She dismissed it. It buzzed again. She dismissed it again. A third buzz, this time a text. Ms. Wolfe. This is Yvonne Harris from the office of Marcus Hale. Mr. Hale requests that you verify your stated connection to James Okafor before this aircraft departs. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Diana read the message twice. Her brow tightened in the way it did when she encountered something that did not fit inside her model of how the world operated. She typed back, "Who is Marcus Hale?" No reply came. She put the phone on the armrest and picked up her champagne. She took a sip and looked at the seatback screen, and in the reflection of the dark glass she could see faintly her own face. Sunglasses off, now resting on the top of her head. She had not put them back on since the confrontation. A small thing. But the cabin, if anyone had been paying attention to small things, might have noticed that the confidence with which she had entered had developed in the past 15 minutes a slight hairline fracture. She was not the kind of person who noticed hairline fractures until they became walls. Before we go any further, I need to stop right here. Because if you are watching this right now, if you are sitting wherever you are sitting, and you have felt the temperature of this story rising in your chest, if you have found yourself thinking about every time you or someone you love was moved out of a space you belonged in, told in some language, spoken or unspoken, that you did not fit, I want you to do 3 things right now. Drop your city in the comments. We want to know where in this world you are watching from. Hit the subscribe button, because what happens next on Flight 4417 is the kind of moment that reminds you why patience is not the same thing as surrender. And share this video with one person today. One person who needs to hear what happens when a man decides to let the truth do what anger never could. Because Marcus Hale has not raised his voice. He has not made a scene. He is sitting in row 32, hands open on his thighs, and the storm he is about to walk back into is not one he created. But it is one he is perfectly prepared to survive. Now back to the story. 31,000 feet below where the aircraft sat at Gate B-22 in a Manhattan office building, 12 minutes from the terminal by foot, Yvonne Harris was already 3 steps ahead of where most people would have been. She had pulled the Meridian Airways executive directory the moment Marcus's first text arrived. She had cross-referenced it against Marcus's personal contact list. She had found James Okafor's direct cell number in under 90 seconds, because Yvonne had been doing this job for 10 years, and the defining quality of those 10 years was that she did not lose time to uncertainty. She dialed. The line rang twice. Okafor. Mr. Okafor. This is Yvonne Harris calling from Marcus Hale's office. Mr. Hale is currently on Meridian Flight 4417 departing from Gate B22. He is sitting in row 32 middle seat. He was removed from seat 1A. She paused to let that land. I thought you should know before the aircraft pushes back. A silence that lasted 3 full seconds. Say that again. Row 32. He purchased seat 1A at full diamond fare. He was moved by your lead flight attendant to accommodate another passenger. The sound of a chair being pushed back from a desk. The kind of sound that chairs make when they are pushed back with intent rather than comfort. Which gate? B22. You have approximately 8 minutes. Tell him I'm coming. I'll tell him. Yvonne ended the call and sent Marcus a single text. He's moving. 8 minutes. Inside the aircraft, Connor Mills made his standard pre-departure intercom announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we are waiting on final departure clearance and should be pushing back shortly. Please ensure your carry-on items are stowed and your seatbelts are fastened. Thank you for your patience. Diana looked at her watch. In row 32, Marcus received Yvonne's text. He read it once, set the phone face down on his thigh, looked at the seat back in front of him. Patrice noticed. Someone coming, she asked. Yes, Marcus said. Someone important. Marcus thought about how to answer that. Someone with a key, he said. 2 rows ahead, Nathan Webb had reopened his laptop but had navigated away from his work document. He was reading Damon Cruz's second post. The comment section had already grown past what was scrollable. He looked up from the screen forward in the direction of first class. He thought about the 12 seconds in which he could have said something when Marcus walked past him and chose instead to watch. He was done watching. Damon Cruz checked his phone again. The first clip, 200,000 views. The second post, 60,000 in 11 minutes. A reporter from a national publication had sent him a direct message. Are you on that flight? Call me. He put the phone down. He looked toward the jet bridge door. He had a feeling the particular premonitory instinct of someone who covered travel and had seen hundreds of ordinary moments that turned into extraordinary ones that the door was about to open in a way nobody on this aircraft was prepared for. He was right. The first sign that something had shifted in the front of the plane was the way Connor stopped moving. He had been in controlled motion since the confrontation, adjusting, managing, performing the practiced choreography of a flight attendant who had resolved a situation and was now administering its aftermath. And then, without an obvious external trigger, he went still. His hand, which had been reaching for a champagne bottle to refresh Diana's glass, paused mid-reach. He turned his head toward the cockpit. Tyler Gross noticed and asked with his eyes what he could not ask with his voice. Connor shook his head slightly. A message had come through on the crew communication system. Not a passenger announcement. Not a standard departure notification. Something from dispatch. Diana noticed Connor's stillness the way she noticed all disruptions to her environment immediately, and with a low-grade irritation that defaulted to assuming someone had made a mistake. Why haven't we pushed back? She asked, not looking up. Minor delay, Connor said, recovering. Completely standard. She looked up. Is this about him? Connor met her gaze and then looked away, which was answer enough. Diana set her champagne glass down. She had not built her professional life on accepting minor delays caused by people who, in her assessment, did not have the standing to cause them. She had not gotten to where she was by accommodating disruptions from below. She stood up. Ms. Wolfe, Connor said, please remain. She was already moving. Her heels found the rhythm of the aisle, and she walked toward the economy curtain with the purposeful stride of someone going to fix something that should not have required fixing. Tyler Gross fell into step behind her, whispering her name. She ignored him. She pulled the economy curtain back and stepped through. The cabin registered her arrival. Conversations paused. A few phones lifted. The woman who had been feeding her infant in row 24 looked up with an expression that went from curious to wary in under a second. Diana walked the aisle. She found row 32 the way you find something you are looking for, with the slight satisfaction of confirmation. She pointed, not subtly, not the way you might gesture toward a problem. She pointed the way you identify property. You, she said. You're the reason this flight is delayed. Whatever you're doing back here, stop it. The cabin went completely quiet. Marcus looked up. He did not startle. He had been aware of her footsteps since she crossed the curtain. He looked at her with the same steady assessment he had used since the moment she first appeared, unhurried, undramatic, the expression of a man who has decided to let the room do the work. "I'm sitting in the seat your flight attendant assigned me," he said. "I know what you're doing," Diana said. Her voice was louder now, pressed into an edge by the frustration of a situation that had not followed the script she expected. "You make a scene. You play the victim. You ruin everything for everyone else on board. I have seen it 100 times." And then Patrice stood up. 60 years old, navy blue jacket, 31 years of standing in front of classrooms where she had been told in every indirect way a school administration knows how to communicate things indirectly that some students were worth more of her time than others. 31 years of disagreeing with that. 60 years of watching the particular mechanism that was currently operating in this aisle and knowing exactly what it was and exactly what it required. She stood up and she looked at Diana Wolf with the directness of someone who had nothing left to prove and therefore nothing to lose. "His type," Patrice said. Her voice was steady and not loud. It did not need to be loud. "What type is that exactly?" Diana turned. The shift from addressing Marcus to being addressed by Patrice seemed to catch her mid-stride the way a conversational assumption meets an unexpected counterpart. "I was speaking to him," Diana said. "And I'm speaking to you," Patrice said. "He has not raised his voice. He has not left this seat since he was assigned to it. You walked back here to confront him. So when you say his type, I need you to complete that sentence, out loud, in front of these people. Tell us what type he is." The silence that followed was the kind that has mass. Diana's jaw moved, but no words came out. Because the words, the ones that had organized her entire response to Marcus from the moment she saw him in seat 1. Those words could not be said out loud in a cabin full of recording phones without becoming a different kind of problem entirely. She knew that. The knowledge of it was written on her face. From row 6, Nathan Webb stood up. He did not speak. He folded his arms and stood in the aisle and looked at Diana Wolf with the expression of a man who had decided 7 minutes too late not to be the kind of person who watches. From row 4, Damon Cruz had shifted fully sideways in his business class seat, his phone extended live. The viewer count was climbing past 400,000. The comments were moving too fast to read a scrolling wall of comprehension and fury. "You got what you wanted," Patrice said, her voice still steady, still not raised. "Leave him alone." Tyler Gross had materialized at Diana's shoulder, his voice low and urgent. "Ms. Wolf, please, let's go back to." Diana turned on him. "Don't manage me." And then she turned back to the aisle and raised her voice to a level that required no phone to amplify. "I want this man removed from this flight, now!" The words landed on every person in the economy cabin. The infant 2 rows back made a sound. The engineers in matching polo shirts looked at each other. The woman with the paperback held it open but was not reading it. Marcus looked at Diana with an expression that had not changed since the first-class cabin. "You already removed me from my seat," he said quietly, precisely. "What else is it you want?" Diana recoiled slightly, not from the words but from the calm of them, the way they refused to become what she needed them to become in order for her behavior to be justified. "I want this flight to be safe," she said. "Safe from what?" Her chin came up. Her voice dropped into the register of something old and certain and ugly. "From people like you." The words fell the way those words always fall, clean and blunt and carrying everything unsaid behind them. The cabin absorbed them. Patrice closed her eyes for one moment, then opened them. Nathan Webb uncrossed his arms. The man in the aisle seat next to Marcus made a short sound through his teeth. From 4 rows up, someone said audibly, "That's enough." Connor appeared at the economy curtain, face-paled eyes tracking the phones, reading the situation with a speed that was too late to be useful. "Ms. Wolf," he said, his voice stripped now of all training, just urgency. "Please, come back to the front." But Diana had not finished. She turned to Connor and said in a voice that was trying to recover its authority and failing, "Get him off this plane right now, or I am calling James Okafor myself." Connor looked at Diana. Then he looked at Marcus. Then he looked at the phones. He saw in the aggregate of those three things the exact shape of the mistake he had made and had been building on with every choice since. He looked at the economy curtain and realized with the particular clarity of someone who can no longer manage a situation that he had run out of moves. At that precise moment, the jet bridge door at the front of the aircraft opened. Not a gate agent, not security. A man in a dark navy suit tie, not yet fully knotted, moving with the controlled urgency of someone who had been running for 8 minutes and was not showing it. James Okafor was 49 years old. He had been with Meridian Airways for 14 years, the last 6 as chief operating officer. He was Nigerian-born, Chicago-raised, and had spent the better part of 3 decades in an industry that rewarded precision and punished sentiment, which had taught him to be both precise and, when precision was not enough, something more. He was not a man who ran. He was a man who moved with intent at a speed that made running unnecessary. And so when he walked through the jet bridge door and into the Meridian 4417 first-class cabin, the effect was not of someone arriving in a panic, but of someone arriving with a decision already made. Connor saw him first. The color left his face in the particular way that blood leaves the extremities when the body receives news that the mind has not yet fully processed. "Mr. Okafor." Okafor did not look at Connor. He looked down the aisle in the direction of the economy curtain. "Mills," he said. One word. The tone of it closed the conversation that Connor had been about to open. Preston Holt looked up from his newspaper. Diana, still standing at the front of the economy section with Tyler Gross at her shoulder, registered the sound of new footsteps and turned. She saw the badge. She saw the face. She saw the name she had been dropping for the past 2 hours attached to a body that was not coming toward her the way she expected, not with the relief-generating authority of a problem being resolved in her favor, but with something else entirely. Something moving past her. Okafor walked through the first-class cabin and through the economy curtain without slowing. The aisle seemed to organize itself around him. Passengers shifted. Eyes followed. Damon Cruz, who had been live for 11 minutes, tilted the camera to follow the movement, and 400,000 people watched a man in a dark suit walk through an economy aisle with the quiet inevitability of weather. He stopped at row 32. Marcus looked up. For a moment only those 2 men existed in that aisle. Okafor stood before him, straightened the half-knotted tie with one hand, and lowered his chin by exactly the degree that constitutes a bow of genuine acknowledgement. "Marcus," he said. His voice was not loud. Every person in a 10-row radius heard it. "I am deeply sorry." The cabin inhaled. Patrice, beside Marcus, pressed both hands flat on the seat back in front of her, steadying herself against a feeling she had not expected to have in an economy cabin at 7:58 in the morning. Nathan Webb, standing in the aisle 3 rows up, put a hand on the headrest beside him. Damon Cruz watched the viewer count break 1 million. Marcus stood. Not dramatically. He stood the way he had sat with the same unhurried deliberateness that had characterized every movement he had made since boarding this aircraft. He was no taller than Okafor. He did not need to be. He took Okafor's extended hand and shook it, once, firm. "James," he said. Okafor kept his grip for an extra second. "This should not have happened," he said. "Not on this aircraft, not to you, not to any passenger on any Meridian flight. I want you to know that what occurred here this morning is a direct violation of everything this airline is supposed to stand for, and it will be addressed completely and immediately." He turned. He turned the way a man turns when he has been clear about what happens next and is now implementing it. Diana Wolfe was standing at the economy curtain with her hands at her sides and an expression on her face that had not yet completed its migration from confusion to comprehension. She had heard Okafor's voice. She had identified it. She was now running a rapid internal calculation about what his presence in this aisle, addressing this man with this tone, meant for the shape of the morning she had believed she was managing. The calculation kept returning the wrong answer. "Michael James," she started. Her voice had lost its precision. "Thank God you're here. This crew has completely—" Ms. Wolfe Okafor said. The way he said her name stopped everything. He did not address her with warmth. He did not address her with hostility. He addressed her with the flat professionalism of an executive resolving a matter of policy which was both more respectful and more devastating than either of the alternatives. Seat 1A belongs to Mr. Hale. His ticket is valid. His status is verified, and his removal from that seat was not authorized by Meridian policy procedure or any code of conduct this airline operates under. Diana opened her mouth. Your Diamond Elite status with Meridian Airways has been suspended effective now pending review. She closed it. You are welcome to remain on this flight in another available seat, or you may deplane. Ground staff will assist you with your luggage either way. The cabin, which had been holding its breath, released it. Diana turned to Connor, who was standing at the first-class curtain with the expression of a man who has realized too late that the thing he thought was a wall was actually a cliff. She looked at him with something that might, in different circumstances, have been a plea. Connor looked at the floor. Okafor turned back to Connor, and his voice, when it came, was not raised and did not need to be. Mr. Mills, you are relieved of your crew duties on this flight, effective immediately. Please collect your personal belongings and report to gate operations for a full incident review. Connor's mouth opened. No sound came. Mr. Gross. Tyler was already backed against the galley wall. Same. Tyler's eyes went wide and wet and then down. Sophia Reyes stepped forward from behind the galley curtain. She had been there for the last 4 minutes, watching with the folded notepad in her apron pocket and the 4-year weight of everything she had seen and not said sitting in her chest. She looked at Okafor. I'm the senior attendant remaining, she said. Her voice was steady. I can handle the flight. Okafor looked at her for 1 moment. Then he nodded. And then from the back of the economy cabin, from the middle row near the lavatories, from a seat that no one in first class had designed for the kind of sound that was about to come from it, Patrice began to clap. 1 pair of hands, then 2, then 5, then the middle of economy catching fire. It rolled forward like something that had been pressurized for a long time and had finally found a release point. It moved from economy into business, from business into first class, from leather seats and champagne flutes and walnut trim into the clean sound of people who had watched something wrong and were now watching it unmade. Preston Holt sat in seat 2A with his hands in his lap. He was the only person in first class not clapping. The camera caught it. Marcus stood in row 32 and listened to the sound of the cabin behind him and let it come forward. Okafor led Marcus through the economy aisle toward the front of the aircraft, and the passengers between them and first class moved without being asked. Not out of obligation. Out of something that felt in the compressed social world of a cabin that had just witnessed 20 minutes of injustice, followed by 40 seconds of its reversal, like participation. Like being part of the right side of a story. Marcus walked with his backpack held in his right hand. He did not look left or right. He did not look at Diana, who had pressed herself to the far wall of the galley as they passed the red Bordeaux bag now clutched to her chest with both arms in the posture of someone who has lost the room and knows it. He did not look at Connor, who was standing near the front galley with his jacket half unzipped, the polished name tag catching the overhead light one final time before it lost its context. He looked forward. He turned left at the front of the aircraft. Seat 1A. The leather was cool. The cream upholstery had the slight compression of a seat that had been recently occupied and then vacated in a hurry. The orchids at the galley station were still slightly off-center. The walnut trim caught the light the same way it always had. Marcus set his backpack in the overhead bin. He lowered himself into the seat with the same unhurried deliberateness he used for everything. He placed his hands open on the armrests. He looked out the window at the gray tarmac at the ground crew in yellow vests moving with practiced purpose through the morning mist. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Okafor settled into the seat beside him and gave him a moment before speaking. I want to understand everything that happened this morning, Okafor said quietly. Not for the review. For me. Marcus looked at the window for another second. Then he turned. You know what happened, he said. You've had it happen on your airline before. You have complaint records that will confirm it when you look for them. What you didn't have until today was someone in the seat who had both the standing and the patience to let it play all the way out. Okafor was quiet. The question isn't what happened, Marcus continued. The question is, what you're going to do about the part of it that has nothing to do with Connor Mills or Diana Wolf. Because they are symptoms. The condition that produced them is in your training manuals. It's in your unwritten protocols. It's in the culture that told a junior attendant named Sophia to stay quiet for 4 years while she watched it happen. He paused. You have to go deeper than 2 terminations. Okafor leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees, the posture of a man actually listening rather than managing. Tell me what deeper looks like, he said. Marcus thought for a moment. Write it into the rules. Not a memo, not a training refresher, not a press statement. The actual rules. No seat reassignment without documented cause verified by at least 2 crew members. No subjective removal request from another passenger accepted as a safety concern without independent corroboration. Every first-class interaction logged automatically. He looked at Okafor. And you go back through the last 3 years of complaint records. You find the ones that were filed and not actioned. You find the people who should have been in seat 1A and were put in row 32. You contact them. Personally. Okafor was nodding slowly. Not the nod of appeasement. The nod of someone absorbing something that has the weight of truth. And the name Okafor asked. The protocol. What do we call it? Marcus looked out the window. Don't name it after me, he said. Then what? Marcus watched a ground crew member wheel a baggage cart through a patch of standing water on the tarmac, the wheels sending small arcs of gray water behind them. Name it after the next person who almost doesn't make it back to their seat, he said. Because there will be one. And when there is the policy, should be there waiting for them. Not my name. The rule. Okafor stood before leaving the aircraft. He stopped and looked at the cabin. Not just first class. The whole length of it through the open curtain all the way back to where Patrice was settled in her middle seat and Nathan Webb had returned to row 6 and Damon Cruz was reviewing footage that was now being reshared faster than the network could track it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am James Okafor, Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Airways. What you witnessed this morning on this aircraft was wrong. It was a violation of our policies, our values, and the basic standard of respect that every person on every Meridian flight has the right to expect. We will be addressing it fully. I am sorry that you had to see it. I am more sorry that it happened. He paused. We are going to be a few minutes late departing. I appreciate your patience. The cabin was quiet for a moment after he stopped speaking. Then from somewhere in economy, a man in a polo shirt said simply, Thank you, and that was enough. Connor Mills collected his jacket and his overnight bag from the crew locker and practiced silence. Tyler Gross did the same faster without looking at anyone. When they walked through the cabin toward the jet bridge, the passengers in first class did not look away. Not from cruelty, from the specific human need to witness consequence, to see the closing of an account. Preston Holt watched them go from seat 2A. He had not moved since Okafor's arrival. He had not spoken. When Connor passed him, Preston looked out the window. A small thing. But the window was where you looked when you could not justify what you had participated in and could not yet face the cost of admitting it. Diana was escorted to the jet bridge by 2 gate service staff members who arrived with the quiet efficiency of people performing a task they understood completely. She walked with her head up the red Bordeaux bag, gripped in both arms, the sunglasses back on. At the jet bridge door, she stopped and turned. She looked at Marcus in seat 1A. He did not look back at her. After a moment, she walked through the door. The door closed behind her, in row 4. A Damon Cruz looked at his phone. Then he looked up. Then he looked at the screen again. 1.4 million views. He put the phone down on the tray table. He looked at the front of the cabin at the back of Marcus's head in seat 1A at the window beside him, framing a strip of gray sky and tarmac. He had been covering travel and airline stories for 6 years. He had filmed delays and arguments and service failures and occasional moments of unexpected grace. He had never in 6 years filmed anything that felt like this. Not like drama. Like something being corrected. Like a record being set straight in public by the right people in time. He did not post anything for several minutes. When he did, it was not a comment on the confrontation or on Diana or on the crew. It was a single sentence, and it said, "This is what accountability looks like when someone refuses to disappear." Sophia Reyes came by with water. She stopped at seat 1A. "Mr. Hale," she said. Her voice was quiet and direct and carried 4 years of something she was putting down. "I should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." Marcus looked at her. "You spoke when it mattered," he said. She nodded, set the glass of water on his tray table, moved on. The engines began their pre-departure sequence. A low building sound that traveled through the floor into the soles of Marcus's feet. The lights in the cabin cycled through their departure configuration. The seatbelt sign illuminated. Captain Victor Adele's voice came over the intercom, steady and deep and without ceremony. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Adele. We have been cleared for departure. Flight time to Los Angeles this morning is 5 hours and 22 minutes. Weather en route is clear. Sit back and let us take care of you." Marcus placed his hands on the armrests. He closed his eyes. The aircraft began to move. For the first time in 3 hours, no one was reaching for his arm. 3 weeks after flight, 4417, a 47-page document, landed in Marcus's inbox from Meridian Airways' Legal and Operations team. It was not a press release. It was not a settlement communication. It was a new operational policy formatted as binding internal regulation with specific clauses addressing seat reassignment procedure, passenger removal protocol, third-party complaint handling in premium cabins, and mandatory crew documentation requirements. The language was exact. The enforcement clauses had teeth. Marcus read it twice. He replied to Okafor with 4 words. "This is a start." Okafor replied, "It's more than a start. It's a contract." Connor Mills spent 60 days on suspension and did not contest it. When his certification review concluded, he was required to complete a retraining program and was reinstated on a regional domestic route with reduced responsibilities and no premium cabin access for a minimum of 18 months. In private to a friend who asked how he was doing, he said, "I think about it every day. I'm not sure yet if that's enough." It was not enough. But it was a beginning. Diana Wolf's name remained searchable for reasons that had nothing to do with Marcus. The viral footage drew the kind of attention that draws other attention, and in the weeks that followed, her family's financial holdings became the subject of scrutiny that had been brewing in regulatory circles for 2 years and had never quite found its moment. The red Bordeaux bag was referenced in news commentary as a symbol of a specific kind of entitlement so complete it does not recognize itself. Diana did not appear in public for several months. When she did, she was quieter. The world had largely stopped waiting to find out why. Marcus found Patrice through the passenger manifest. He wrote her a letter, handwritten, not typed 4 paragraphs on cream card stock. He told her that what she had done in row 32 was not a small thing dressed up as a small thing. That the specific courage of standing up for someone you do not know in a place where standing costs you something is rarer and more important than most forms of recognized bravery. That he had thought about the 2 words she said to him, it shouldn't more than he had thought about any of the drama that preceded and followed them. Because those 2 words were the whole argument. Everything else was just the elaboration of what those 2 words already contained. Patrice received it on a Tuesday. She read it at her kitchen table with her second cup of coffee. She read it twice. She folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept the things she wanted to be able to find again. Then she went back to her morning, which was ordinary and full of small purpose and entirely in the way of good lives enough. Sophia Reyes received the formal commendation Marcus had requested. It was noted in her personnel file, which had until that point contained 1 formal warning for speaking out of turn during a crew debrief. The warning was reviewed in context and removed. She was offered a senior cabin coordinator position on the Pacific routes. She took it. On her first flight in the new role, she walked through the full cabin before departure and said good morning to every passenger individually. It took 4 extra minutes. The feedback card from a passenger in row 22 read, "I felt like a person." That doesn't always happen. Sophia kept the card. 6 months after Flight 4, 417, Marcus Hale boarded Meridian Airways' morning departure from JFK to Los Angeles. Same route, same gate, same departure time. He walked through the terminal without being noticed, which was how he preferred it. At gate B22, the agent checked his boarding pass and smiled. "Seat 1, Mr. Hale. Welcome aboard." He walked the jet bridge alone, stepped into the cabin, turned left. The flight attendant at the galley, a young woman with a name tag that read Isabel, said, "Welcome aboard, sir. Can I take your bag?" "I've got it," he said. "Thank you." He stowed the carry-on. He sat down. He put his hands on the armrests and looked out the window at the gray morning tarmac, at the ground crew doing the quiet work of preparation at the city beyond the airfield, waking up into another ordinary day. No one questioned him. No one redirected him. No one performed a calculation at his expense. He closed his eyes. The 5 minutes of quiet he had wanted at the start of this story arrived now without drama and without announcement. The aircraft pushed back. The engines climbed. The ground fell away. Marcus Hale did not fight for seat 1A because it was premium. He fought for it because the moment you accept being moved out of a space you earned, you make it easier for the next person to be moved, and the person after them, and the one after that. He stayed because the quiet dignity of remaining where you belong, unmoved by the force of other people's assumptions, is one of the most powerful things a person can do. If you have ever been told you don't belong in a room you built your way into, this story is yours. If you have ever stood up for someone in a middle seat when it would have been easier to look out the window, this story is yours too. And if you have ever been the one looking out the window, wishing later that you hadn't, there is still time to change that. The next row 32 is somewhere. The next person who needs someone to stand up is already there. The question is whether you will be Patrice. If this story stayed with you today, if you felt something rise in your chest when Patrice stood up, when Okafor walked that aisle, when Marcus sat back down in seat 1A without a single word of triumph, then you already know what this channel is about. We tell stories about what happens when quiet strength meets loud assumption, about what happens when people who have been underestimated their entire lives simply refuse to move, about what justice looks like when it arrives not with a speech, but with a policy, a handwritten letter, and a seat on a plane that nobody questions anymore. So do 3 things right now. Like this video. It takes 1 second, and it tells the platform that stories like this deserve to be seen by more people. Subscribe to the channel because we have more stories coming, and you do not want to miss them. And share this video with 1 person today. 1 person in your life who needs this story. Someone who has been moved out of a seat they earned. Someone who needs to know that staying calm, staying dignified, and refusing to disappear is not weakness. It is the whole strategy. Drop 3 words in the comments right now and tell us where you stand. We will see you in the next story.